From the News Channel 5 Network, this is SportsLine.
Hey there, SportsLine on your television. Steve Lehman here with you. Glad you are here with us on this Monday night on News Channel 5. Plus, we got several topics to get to tonight on the program. We're going to hear from Titans linebacker Derek Morgan, his complete sit-down interview with John Burton, talking about the defense, talking about his progression in this defense, moving from defensive end to outside linebackers. The Titans switched to the 3-4, now under Dick LeBeau, and also the excitement around the Titans moving forward in 2016. We'll also hear from Middle Tennessee basketball coach Kermit Davis. Of course, the Blue Raiders coming off that improbable NCAA tournament run where they stunned Michigan State, one of the biggest upsets in tournament history. Now this week they are up for an ESPY in the category of biggest upset for that game. They're getting set to head out west for the ESPYs on Wednesday night, and obviously that's just a thrill to be a part of that and to have Middle Tennessee once again on the national stage, all because of that team, that season, and what those guys were able to do. And we'll hear from Joseph Newgarden, the Hendersonville native, winning the Iowa Corn 300 yesterday. And this is a remarkable story. If you don't pay a lot of attention to IndyCar, this was Newgarden, who's 25 years old, his third win in the IndyCar circuit. Got his first two last year. He's competing well this year. But if you dive a little deeper in, it was just a month ago in Fort Worth at Texas Motor Speedway that he was involved in a horrifying crash. He was flipped upside down, slammed into the wall. At one point, I think he was actually sliding down the track, essentially on his head, unprotected there in the Indy cars that we all know. He gets out of the car and essentially just collapses right on the spot. And you thought, oh man, this could be really bad. And fortunately, as bad as it was, he only, I say only, suffered a broken clavicle and a broken hand. So he was able to get mended up very quickly, get back in the car, start competing right away, didn't miss a single race. Struggled maybe, I think he would admit, through the first race back, but still finished in the top 10. And now this weekend, less than a month after that scary accident in Fort Worth, he wins the Iowa Corn 300 in record fashion. He led 282 of the 300 laps yesterday in Iowa. That is an IndyCar record. He gets that win, and now he is second in the points race in the IndyCar standings with a little less than half of the season left to go. So just a remarkable turnaround when you think of where he was and how scary that accident was to where he was yesterday, back in the winner's circle in IndyCar. So we'll hear from Joseph Newgarden, Kermit Davis, Derek Morgan, all coming up on the program tonight. You guys obviously have an opportunity to get in on the show as well. 737-7767. Some other things going on in the world of sports today. Tim Duncan retiring after 19 years. The big fundamental hanging it up. And I think it is a remarkable career that will be remembered as such, and probably even more so the longer we get away from it. I think if you're really clued in on basketball, you know just how good Tim Duncan is. But I think to some degree his longevity and the fact that in the last 2 to 3, maybe even 4 seasons, 5 seasons, he wasn't the dominant player that he once was. A good player, a very good player, but not the dominant type of Tim Duncan that we saw for much of the 2000s, basically. And I think some people, unfortunately, will remember that first. They'll remember the fact that he was a very good player, but not necessarily a great player. And when you think about Tim Duncan is, to me, probably the best power forward in the history of the NBA. The way he played, how he kind of redefined that position. He helped San Antonio build a dynasty. The Spurs won 5 titles while he was there. They were always in the mix. I mean, even this year, in his final season, the Spurs win 67 games, which is the most they've ever won in a regular season. And everybody would have been talking about that if it wasn't for the Warriors winning 73 games. What Tim Duncan did year in and year out is unbelievable. 15-time All-Star, 2-time MVP, 5-time NBA champion. It is a remarkable career, and here's the other thing about it. In an age when we've talked a lot in the last few years about LeBron's decision to leave Cleveland and go to Miami and go back to Cleveland, and now Kevin Durant choosing to go to Golden State because he feels like he has a better chance to win there, Tim Duncan played his entire career, 19 seasons, in San Antonio with the Spurs. That was home. That was his team. And it still is. They're set up for success moving forward, and a large part of that is the leadership, the unselfishness, the character that Tim Duncan had and helped Greg Popovich build what is a winning culture, perhaps the best winning culture in the NBA in San Antonio. You know, David Robinson was there, but Robinson didn't have a ton of success until Duncan joined him. And then when the Admiral retired, other guys joined. Tony Parker came. Manu Ginobili came. Kawhi Leonard came as of late. But here's the thing. Duncan was there, and Duncan was the tone setter. And the way he played with unselfishness and with that character, that set the tone for the rest of the Spurs. And that is a big reason why they were so good and have been so good for so long, and I imagine that will continue moving forward. So Tim Duncan hangs it up today after 19 seasons in the NBA, all with the Spurs. Certainly a legendary career to be remembered. You also have the Major League Baseball Home Run Derby going on in San Diego tonight. Giancarlo Stanton, the star of the quarterfinal round, 24 home runs in the first round tonight. Just an impressive showing, because here's the other thing. Last year when they set those record numbers with the new timing system and the bracketed format, they put up 159 dingers. That was hitter-friendly Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati. This year, it's pitcher-friendly Petco Park in San Diego with the marine layer and all that stuff. That's not an easy ballpark to hit a bunch of home runs in. Giancarlo Stanton can hit a home run anywhere, because he put up 24 in the first round, which is just silly. So good theater there tonight. Then, of course, the Major League Baseball All-Star Game tomorrow night in San Diego. Mookie Betts, former Overton star, representing the American League. Red Sox right fielder, one of the best hitters in the game now. Such an impressive career he's had from a guy drafted in the 5th round out of high school. Red Sox just kind of hoped he'd be able to provide some big league depth for them. He's turned into one of the best hitters in the game. He's a speedy guy. He's got a good arm. He plays good defense. Actually converted from a second baseman or a middle infielder into a guy that has become a very good outfielder, and now an all-star outfielder. So a remarkable story there. And then, of course, Ben Zobrist in the all-star game for the 3rd time. The Franklin native, his wife a singer in town here. So excited to see both of those guys going against each other tomorrow night. And, of course, home field advantage in the World Series on the line, which could impact both of those teams, because the Red Sox are having a great season. The Cubs obviously in first place by 7 games in the NL Central here as we approach the Midsummer Classic tomorrow night. And also going on today, tomorrow, and through Thursday down in Hoover, the SEC Football Media Days. We are still over 50 days away from kickoff. Tennessee and Vanderbilt, both Thursday night, September 1st, really kicking off the college football season. But yet the season feels like it's starting today, because guys are already getting up there and throwing out the coaching cliches and all of that stuff, and you really start to talk about it. The trash talk begins, all of that. Vanderbilt's Derek Mason hitting the podium today. The things I walked away impressed with from Mason is he seems more comfortable. Remember, he was a first-time head coach when he took this job 3 years ago, and had a very tough act to follow in James Franklin, who for what he did as a head coach. And what he did as a head coach at Vanderbilt is incredibly impressive. Whatever you think about him as a person, or whatever you think about the job he's done at Penn State, what he did at Vanderbilt, taking over a program that really had not had any sustained success, and the bowl trips were few and far between, to go in there and go to 3 consecutive bowl games and have back-to-back 9-win seasons, it is remarkable. And that is why his star was so bright at that point, and he was coveted by a lot of programs in America, including Penn State, which ultimately lured him away. But that was the act that Derek Mason had to follow, both on and off the field. And I think as he came in, he had to adjust to that and figure out who he was going to be. What kind of a person is he? Because he can't be James Franklin. He's not going to be James Franklin. He's got to be Derek Mason. But he had to figure out who that was as a head coach while living up to those expectations that were so inflated by the job that Franklin had done. After a couple seasons, I think Mason's really started to figure it out now. Last year you saw the move to going back to calling the defensive plays, essentially being his own defensive coordinator, and the defense was much improved last season. He had an immediate impact on that side of the ball, and I expect that to continue this year because there's some talent over there, led by Zach Cunningham, who is a Maxwell Award nominee, a Nagurski Award, Bednarik Award. He's way up there because of his credentials. And you've got several other guys on that side of the ball that are athletes that can make plays, and you expect Derek Mason to put them in the right position. Offensively, you finally got some experience on the Derek Mason coach team. And they've gone with Kyle Shermer, which I think is a good move at quarterback. The quarterback carousel, or the quarterback competition, I should say, turned into a quarterback carousel, which then pretty much turned into quarterback controversy in his first 2 years. Finally, last year at the end of the season, new offensive coordinator Andy Ludwig and Derek Mason went with Kyle Shermer and let him take some lumps, but he proved something to them. He proved some toughness. He proved the ability to make some plays. He got better with each and every game. That final game against Tennessee, he threw for 3 touchdown passes against the Vols. That gives you something to build off of, and then apparently he's had a really good offseason. I think it's a great move to come out in front of this and say, look, Kyle Shermer is our quarterback, and that's what Derek Mason has said. And so now he doesn't have to look over his shoulder. He can focus on learning what he has to. He's still just a sophomore, a true sophomore at that, and being the leader of this team, because that's what the Commodores need. He's got a really good running back in Ralph Webb in the backfield, who's had 2 very good seasons on campus. And this offensive line, to me, should be much improved. You've got some veterans across the line, and the big thing is Andrew Jelks, a guy who was an all-SEC performer and missed all of last season because he was hurt in training camp. He's back, and he's healthy. So now you get him up there as a big old anchor on that offensive line. That helps out Vanderbilt a ton heading into the year, too, because if you can create some holes up front and let Webb squirt through them, you're going to have a good running game. And if you have that good running game, now that allows Shermer to play into his strengths. And you don't ask him to make every play out there because, remember, he still is just a sophomore. He only played 5 games as a freshman, starting the Final Four. You don't want to put too much pressure on him, and I think Vanderbilt is set up now to not have to do that. And the other thing that I love to hear, Derek Mason today in Hoover, to me, made me want to go out and run through a brick wall or strap him up and go play myself. It felt kind of like a pep talk from Derek Mason today in Hoover, and I think that's exciting if you're a Vanderbilt fan. Got me excited as a media member for sure. The biggest thing he said, though, is he said, our guys know how to compete at this point. They know how to compete. We've learned that the last couple of years. We're competitive in the SEC. We were last year. But it's not just about competing now. We got to win. We got to win games. And that is what you want to hear at Vanderbilt, because competing isn't good enough anymore. And that's what the James Franklin era showed. You can't just compete and be happy. Commodores fans, Commodores players, they expect wins. They expect bowl trips now. And Derek Mason certainly understands that going into year 3. And so while there was improvement last year, probably more than what you saw just going from 3-9 to 4-8, I think they were a considerably better football team last year and much more competitive in every game than what we saw 2 years ago. But they understand this is a results-oriented business. And at some point, you got to go from competitive to winners. And that's the task for them this year. And if you look back last year, there were several games, the Florida game's the one that stands out the most to me, where Vanderbilt had a shot. They were the better team on the field for much of that game. But when it came down to finishing drives, getting points, finishing series on defense, getting off the field, winning games in the fourth quarter, that team was maybe just a little bit too young or just a little bit inexperienced or frankly, maybe just didn't believe in themselves enough to get it done. They've got to fix that this year. They believe they can because they have more experience. And those guys believe it now. So that's what their challenge is taking that competition, turning it into belief, and figuring out how to win games. We'll take some questions on that. SEC Media Days Tennessee will be up tomorrow before they come up here tomorrow night as well for an event here in town. 737-7767 is the number. We'll also hear from Joseph Newgarden, champion yesterday in Iowa, Kermit Davis, Middle Tennessee coach, and Derek Morgan of the Titans coming up throughout the course of the night. Stay tuned. More SportsLine on the way right after this break.